Flight attendant mocks passengers' old shoes, stunned when he pays for everyone's flight. Welcome, everyone. In today's story, we'll board a plane and witness how a seemingly harmless situation spirals into a tense and thought-provoking drama. Have you ever thought about how easy it is to judge someone by their appearance, maybe a scuffed pair of shoes or a mismatched outfit, and form unfair conclusions? Our story begins with a single glance, grows into a cruel remark, and explodes into a life-changing moment of generosity that no one on the flight will ever forget. Prepare for intrigue, emotional twists, and, most importantly, the humbling power of immediate karma. Fasten your seatbelt, and let's embark on this unforgettable journey. Before we dive in, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. If you're excited about this story, let us know. If you enjoyed the video, press 1. If not, press O. Your feedback really inspires me to gather more uplifting and meaningful stories. Ariel Kincaid tugged on her fitted Delta Airlines blazer before heading toward Gate B24 in the bustling Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. She'd been a flight attendant for nearly 2 years, and, in her eyes, she had already seen it all: panicked flyers, boisterous bachelorette parties, celebrities demanding special treatment. But she'd also grown used to the routine judgments and subtle class distinctions that occurred every day in the skies. Ariel prided herself on her polished appearance. Her black pumps gleamed without a single scuff, and her hair was swept up in a neat bun. Sometimes she even boasted that she looked more like a runway model than a flight attendant. Her reflection in the terminal windows always comforted her, no detail out of place. Yet behind her immaculate facade, a mix of ambition and insecurity simmered. She envied the wealthier passengers who boarded carrying Louis Vuitton luggage or wearing designer scarves. She'd watch them waltz into first class as if they owned the world. Ariel wanted that lifestyle, craved it. In fact, someday she vowed to have a life as glamorous as her most affluent flyers. Today's flight was DL3 127, bound for Los Angeles. As Ariel neared the gate podium to begin pre-boarding checks, she saw a middle-aged man leaning against a pillar, scanning the crowd. He wore a faded baseball cap, a simple cotton jacket, and most noticeably, an old pair of scuffed sneakers with frayed laces. Something about those shoes made Ariel's lip curl in mild disdain. She couldn't help but think they looked like a pair of decade-old Converse Chuck Taylors that had trudged through mud. Ariel turned away, quickly dismissing him. She had a mental list of high-value passengers to keep an eye on: the VIP in first class, a traveling musician in business class, a group of realtors who had paid for upgraded seats. The man with the battered shoes clearly didn't fit that category, probably an economy-class traveler, she thought. He'll blend right into the back of the plane. Ariel found her fellow flight attendants, Sharon and Mateo, already scanning tickets at the gate. They exchanged a few pleasantries, then launched into their standard safety routines. On-time departure? Check. Weather forecast? Check. Full flight? Check. Soon enough, pre-boarding commenced. Families with small children went first, followed by those who needed extra assistance. The man with the battered sneakers was among them, ambling toward the jet bridge before Ariel could offer help. Despite his advanced boarding group, he simply and quietly walked past, giving Ariel a small, polite nod. Ariel brushed off a hint of curiosity about him and returned the nod out of courtesy. Little did she know how profoundly her interactions with this very passenger would rock the flight and expose harsh truths lurking in her own ambitions. Once on board the Boeing 757, Ariel scanned the rows to ensure carry-on luggage was stowed properly. She spotted the man with the battered sneakers in row 16, an exit row, one of those seats with a bit more legroom, but also the responsibility of helping in an emergency. She watched him tuck his small duffel under the seat. During boarding, chaos always reigned. Passengers crammed oversized bags into overhead bins, jostling each other in the aisle. A father tried corralling restless toddlers. Two flight attendants in first class managed the well-heeled crowd, ordering pre-flight beverages. Ariel remained in economy, politely directing travelers to their seats. Eventually, the plane filled to capacity. Ariel prepared to do the safety demonstration. As she walked down the aisle, she caught a glimpse of battered shoes man rummaging in a battered-looking wallet. He had no phone out, something Ariel found slightly odd, given that nearly everyone else was glued to their devices. He just sat, glancing at the seatback safety card from time to time. She shrugged. Probably doesn't travel much. As the flight taxied to the runway, the overhead monitors played the safety video, and Ariel stepped to her assigned spot to perform the demonstration for those who might need extra attention. She tried to maintain her usual bright expression, but her eyes occasionally drifted over to row 16. The man looked entirely at ease, leaning forward slightly to pay attention to her demonstration, an uncommon courtesy, since most passengers either dozed off or stared at their phones. When the plane thundered into the sky, Ariel and her colleagues buckled in for takeoff. The last bit of Georgia's landscape vanished beneath the clouds. Soon, the seatbelt sign dinged off, and the cabin became a flurry of motion again. Ariel and Matteo wheeled out the beverage cart, starting from the front of economy class. When they reached row 16, the man gave Ariel a gentle smile. "Just water, please." Ariel handed him a plastic cup. She couldn't resist a quick glance at his shoes again. The cloth was threadbare, and the rubber soles were starting to peel. Maybe she should offer him a blanket to cover them up, she thought wryly. The unkind humor flitted through her mind before she pushed it away. She prided herself on being professional, yet inside, a cruel streak occasionally emerged. The man must have noticed her eyes lingering. "They're pretty old," he remarked, wiggling his toes in the worn sneakers, "but they've carried me far." She offered a tight smile, not sure how to respond. She finished serving his row and continued down the aisle. But her mind replayed his remark. "They've carried me far. Who says that about shoes?" Perhaps they were special to him for sentimental reasons, or maybe he just couldn't afford new ones. Ariel felt a spark of pity, then quickly brushed it off. She had enough to worry about, no need to dwell on one random passenger's footwear. Little did she realize that her contemptuous views, soon to be vocalized, would spiral into a confrontation with immediate ramifications and shocking revelations that would flip her perspective upside down. An hour into the flight, the captain alerted them to mild turbulence. Ariel was forced to stow the beverage cart early and strap into her jump seat. The cabin lights flickered slightly as the plane jostled. Across the aisle, she saw battered shoes. Man calmly resting his hands on his tray table, unperturbed by the bumpy ride. The turbulence passed quickly, and Ariel resumed her tasks. She began collecting trash and answering call buttons. At row 16, a nearby passenger flagged her down. "Excuse me, could we get a blanket?" Ariel apologized and hurried to check the overhead compartments in the galley. Blankets were in short supply. She only found one left. As she walked back, she saw the passenger in row 16 shivering slightly, an elderly woman who looked especially cold. Next to her sat the man with the battered shoes, who appeared concerned for her. The second passenger, who requested a blanket, was a younger man who was also rubbing his arms in the chilly cabin. Ariel faced a dilemma. Only one blanket left, 2 requests. She weighed her options. The elderly woman clearly needed it more, but the younger man had asked first. Deciding to uphold the first come, first served principle, she gave the blanket to the younger man. However, as she walked away, she overheard Battered Shoes' man softly chastising her under his breath. "That's not right," he said, glancing at the shivering older lady. Ariel froze. She turned around, eyebrows raised. "I'm sorry?" The man looked genuinely upset. "She clearly needs the blanket more," he said, gesturing to the elderly passenger, whose shoulders shook beneath her cardigan. "Isn't that what a flight attendant is supposed to do, help those who need it most?" His words felt like an indictment. Ariel stiffened, mustering her professional tone. "Sir, we have a policy to fulfill requests as they come in, and there's a limited supply on board. I'm sorry if that's inconvenient, but I have to be fair to all passengers." He frowned. "But is that really fairness?" He reached over and took off his jacket, draping it around the elderly woman's shoulders. She gave him a grateful nod, while Ariel felt a flicker of guilt. The man met Ariel's gaze, disapproval evident in his eyes. She clenched her jaw. "I'm doing my job, sir." Without another word, she turned sharply and continued down the aisle, irritation coiling in her chest. What gave him the right to question her judgment? Ariel returned to the galley, rummaging needlessly just to distract herself. She felt a sting of embarrassment that a mere passenger would call her out in front of others. Yet there was also that tiny pang of conscience. Maybe she had made a misstep. The old woman truly did look cold. She pulled out a cup of hot tea, deciding to bring it to the elderly passenger as a small gesture of kindness. But a part of her also wanted to prove the man wrong. I can be compassionate too. When Ariel approached row 16 again, the man offered a polite smile, as if to say thank you for trying. She noticed that the elderly woman clutched his jacket, clearly warming up now. Ariel handed her the tea, which she sipped gratefully. The tension between Ariel and Battered Shoes' man remained, though. She sensed it in the air. Her unspoken annoyance simmered. What's with this guy, acting so righteous in old shoes and all? Soon, the flight resumed its course without further turbulence. Yet the seeds of discord were firmly planted, waiting for one more spark to ignite a confrontation that would lead to immediate and very public karma for Ariel. 2 hours into the cross-country journey, the cabin lights dimmed for those wanting to sleep. Ariel made her rounds with a soft footstep. She noticed that Battered Shoes' man was reading a hardcover book, unusual in an era of e-readers and tablets. She couldn't make out the title, but she caught sight of a bookmark embroidered with the word Zappos, a real footwear company known for its unique workplace culture and philanthropic endeavors. For a brief second, she found it ironic, the man reading a shoe company-related bookmark while wearing such battered footwear. She continued checking overhead bins and seatbelts. Then, from the corner of her eye, she saw the man ring the attendant call button. With a small sigh, she strode over. "Yes, sir?" He handed her a piece of paper. "Could I trouble you for a pen?" "I need to make some notes." His voice was calm, but Ariel recalled the tension between them. She forced a tight smile and produced a spare Airline pen from her pocket. "Of course." As she handed it to him, she couldn't help letting her gaze flick once more to his frayed sneakers. A fleeting look of distaste crossed her face before she could stop it. He caught it. "Something bothering you?" he asked, eyebrow raised. Ariel felt her cheeks burn. Instead of smoothing it over, her lingering annoyance from earlier found an outlet. "Actually," she said, trying to keep her voice low, "it's a bit distracting to see shoes in that condition on a flight like this." He stared at her, momentarily speechless. Passengers nearby perked up, some removing earphones to catch the conversation. Ariel continued, her frustration edging into her words. "I just think, maybe, if you plan on traveling, it's worth presenting yourself appropriately. People do notice." He blinked slowly, as though processing her statement. "I see," he said, voice tight. "So, I suppose you're suggesting my shoes are a problem?" Ariel folded her arms across her chest. They're not a problem for me, sir, but it might reflect poorly on you, that's all. We have certain standards as an airline, and passengers generally dress decently. A hush fell over that section of the plane. A woman across the aisle gawked. The elderly lady who had borrowed the man's jacket looked at Ariel in dismay. Even Matteo, the other flight attendant, peeked over from a few rows ahead, concern etched on his face. The man set his book aside. "I can't believe you're saying this. Isn't your job to treat passengers with respect, regardless of how they dress? And for your information," he tapped the heel of one sneaker, "these shoes are special to me. I've worn them through thick and thin, some of the best moments of my life." Ariel realized the conversation was spiraling in front of an audience. She cleared her throat. "Look, I'm not trying to offend you, sir. I'm simply stating that your footwear is quite well loved, and some might find it unprofessional or unkempt. That's all." A wry grin tugged at his lips. "Unprofessional, huh?" He studied Ariel's polished pumps, then looked at his seatmates who watched with wide eyes. "I guess appearances are everything to you." Before Ariel could respond, the man calmly handed the pen back, no longer needing it. His eyes were cool, unwavering. "Thank you for your input. I'll keep that in mind." Feeling rattled, Ariel turned on her heel. Over her shoulder, she noticed a few passengers whispering, some shaking their heads in disapproval. Her heart thumped painfully. She sensed she'd overstepped a boundary. Yet she couldn't help doubling down internally. He was rude first, criticizing my blanket decision. I'm allowed to speak my mind. Nevertheless, a seed of dread took hold. She'd inadvertently transformed a minor friction into a public standoff, and the consequences were only just beginning to unfold. The flight continued in tense silence for a while. Ariel kept to herself, only emerging to perform essential tasks. Passengers who had witnessed the confrontation eyed her warily, as if they feared becoming targets of her next comment. Meanwhile, Battered Shoes Man sat quietly, but a thoughtful frown graced his face. He jotted something in a small notepad, occasionally stealing glances toward the front galley. Despite the pressure building in her chest, Ariel tried to regain composure. She reminded herself of her training, remain calm, collected, and professional. Her colleague Matteo approached her in the galley. "Hey, everything okay? I noticed you and that passenger in 16 had a moment." Ariel bit her lip. "He was being confrontational," she said. "I might have been a bit too frank." Matteo gave her a sympathetic look. "Just be careful. You never know who you're talking to or what social media can do. If someone filmed that, it could be trouble." She nodded, a knot of anxiety tightening in her gut. Social media, the thought made her shiver. She'd seen how quickly incidents could go viral. She resolved to keep her distance from the man for the remainder of the flight. As the plane neared the end of its journey, the captain announced an unexpected schedule change due to strong headwinds. They'd be arriving 30 minutes late. Grumbles rippled through the cabin. Some had tight connections or urgent matters. Ariel could sense the frustration mounting, a wave of collective annoyance that often fell on flight attendants as convenient targets. When the aircraft finally touched down at Los Angeles International Airport, many passengers were already on edge. Ariel's job, of course, was to maintain order and ensure a safe, organized deplaning. She approached row 16, forced to muster a polite smile as she reminded them to stay seated until the seatbelt sign was off. Battered Shoes Man nodded curtly, his expression unreadable. Once the plane reached the gate and the door opened, the usual scramble ensued. People yanked bags from overhead bins, rummaging for personal items. Ariel prepared to bid each passenger goodbye, though her nerves crackled with anticipation. She wondered if row 1616's occupant would file a complaint. She pictured him storming off, demanding her name and employee ID. However, the man with the battered sneakers did something entirely unexpected. He stepped into the aisle, pulled out his wallet, and engaged Sharon, the lead flight attendant. In a brief conversation, Ariel overheard just a few words. entire flight, cover costs, and gesture of goodwill. She couldn't make sense of it. Why would he talk about covering the entire flight's cost? Curiosity spiked, but Ariel's attention was stolen by a couple asking for help with a baby stroller. By the time she'd resolved that, the man had disappeared from the aircraft. Sharon stood in stunned silence at the front galley, staring at a slip of paper in her hand. Ariel hurried over. "Sharon? Everything okay?" Sharon's eyes shone with disbelief. He just paid for everyone's ticket." Ariel blinked. "What?" He said he was, picking up the tab. "For every passenger's flight today. The man gave me a business check with a sum that covers all our seat fares. I'm speechless." The cabin fell silent around them. A few passengers, still within earshot, gasped in astonishment. Others, who had already stepped into the jet bridge, paused to watch the unfolding drama. Ariel's stomach flipped. Had the same man she ridiculed for wearing old shoes just paid thousands, maybe tens of thousands of dollars to cover every single fare? Sharon fanned herself with the check, as if trying to recover from the shock. "He told me to pass along a message," she whispered. "Said, if appearances matter so much, maybe this will help you see beyond them next time." Ariel's cheeks went hot as realization dawned. The battered shoes man was sending a pointed message, and the target of that message was quite obviously her. Outside the aircraft, the terminal buzzed with excitement. Word spread quickly among deplaning passengers that a mysterious man in row 16 had allegedly paid for everyone's tickets. A few skeptics questioned if it was real or some kind of elaborate prank, but the slip of paper in Sharon's trembling hands, bearing the letterhead of a reputable bank, suggested otherwise. Ariel felt her heart pounding. She followed Sharon to the gate agent's station, where a Delta supervisor was already on the phone with the corporate office. Sharon handed over the check, explaining that the passenger insisted it be used to reimburse or cover the costs of all tickets. The supervisor wore a perplexed look, but excitement glimmered in her eyes at the thought of such an astonishing gesture. Amid the swirl of staff members verifying the check's authenticity, Ariel stood off to the side, face burning. She was torn between disbelief and deep embarrassment. How is this possible? She replayed her mocking words in her head, "Worth presenting yourself appropriately." Some might find it unprofessional. Every syllable now felt like poison, especially given the man's extraordinary act of generosity. If he could afford to do something like this, he clearly wasn't strapped for cash. Her assumption about his financial situation had been as far off the mark as possible. Within minutes, the airline's higher-ups confirmed that the check was legitimate. One of the corporate liaison officers approached, grinning from ear to ear. "This is unprecedented," he told Sharon. "We're going to credit every passenger's account with a full refund. If anything remains after that, we'll donate it to an airline charity." "Amazing." Sharon nodded, her gaze sliding over to Ariel. She frowned, concern creasing her brow. "Where's Ariel in all this?" she asked quietly. "She was on that flight." Sharon caught herself. Maybe she sensed that the fiasco had begun with Ariel's unkind remarks. Ariel felt a knot in her stomach tighten. She wasn't sure if she should run and hide or own up to her role in the confrontation. In the end, she did neither. She simply stood, transfixed, as her fellow flight attendants and ground staff buzzed with excitement about the mystery philanthropist in row 16. A few lingering passengers recognized Ariel as the flight attendant who'd had words with the man in the battered shoes. One middle-aged traveler shook her head disapprovingly when she saw Ariel. Another shot her a sympathetic look, as if pitying her for becoming the unwitting villain in this real-life fairy tale. At that moment, the overhead speakers in the terminal crackled to life with an announcement requesting the presence of Ariel Kincaid in the nearest Delta supervisory office. Ariel closed her eyes, inhaling a shaky breath. Here it comes. She could already see the headlines in her mind. Flight attendant mocks kind passenger, learns a hard lesson. The immediate karma that fate had prepared for her was about to unfold in that office. She braced herself for whatever repercussions awaited. Ariel was ushered into a small glass, walled conference room near the terminal gates. Inside waited two Delta supervisors, Paula Robinson, who handled public relations crises, and Dan Baker, who oversaw flight attendant conduct and performance. Both wore serious expressions. "Ariel," Dan began, folding his hands on the table, "we've just been informed about an incident on board Flight DL-327 involving you and a passenger who ended up paying for every traveler's flight." Paula nodded, tapping a notepad. "We need to know exactly what happened from your perspective." Word is spreading fast. Some passengers are already posting on social media about how a flight attendant criticized a man's old shoes, only to have him turn out to be extremely wealthy and generous. Ariel swallowed, cheeks flaming. She replayed the entire ordeal in her mind, the tension over the blanket, her annoyance at him questioning her choices, her final remark about his footwear. She explained the sequence in a subdued tone, trying to balance honesty with a dash of self-defense. "He called me out first about the blanket decision, remember, and then I might said some things about his shoes that I regret." Paula scribbled notes. "He singled you out specifically with that message to see beyond appearances. That's clearly a direct response to your comments about his footwear." Ariel bit her lip. "Yes, it seems so." Dan sighed. "Ariel, we appreciate your honesty, but this is a PR nightmare waiting to happen. We have an extremely generous passenger who's also shown that he has the means to make large gestures. He could easily fund a campaign against our airline if he felt slighted enough." Ariel's pulse quickened. He left the plane quietly, no big scene. Maybe he just wanted to do something nice, albeit in a pointed way. Paula leaned forward, her voice taut with urgency. "We can't assume he's done with this. We need to handle it proactively. The airline's official stance is deep gratitude for his generosity, but we also have to address the fact that an attendant under our employment was caught ridiculing a passenger's appearance." A hot flush ran up Ariel's neck. She sensed where this was headed. The immediate karmic backlash was about to strike. The airline couldn't afford negative headlines, especially in a market saturated with stories of bad customer service. "They'll make an example of me," she thought grimly. "We're going to conduct a brief investigation," Dan said evenly. "We need statements from the flight crew, and possibly from any passengers who witnessed the exchange. During that time, we'll place you on paid administrative leave. It's standard procedure." Paula offered a small, apologetic shrug. "We just want to ensure no corners are cut. We need to reassure the public that we take such complaints seriously." Ariel bit down on a wave of shame. Her job, her dream of climbing the airline ranks, all balanced precariously on the tip of this moment. She felt the sting of tears at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them away. Her unkind comment had led to this, and ironically, the passenger she'd demeaned was the biggest reason that flight was now a viral feel-good story. The meeting concluded with Ariel handing over her ID badge for temporary safekeeping. She left the conference room under the weight of stares from other employees. In her mind, she kept replaying the battered shoes man's parting remark, "If appearances matter so much, maybe this will help you see beyond them next time." Those words seemed to echo louder with each step she took, reminding her that the world has a way of handing out swift lessons to those who act too hastily. For the next few days, Ariel grappled with the aftermath of that fateful flight. News outlets picked up the story of the mysterious passenger who paid everyone's fare. Many headlines spun it as a feel-good piece. Good Samaritan surprises entire plane with generous gesture. But social media chatter also touched on the rumored conflict with a judgmental flight attendant. Ariel found herself at home, anxiously scrolling through comments, terrified her name would appear in the tabloids. She discovered that the passenger's name was, in fact, Marcus Lowry, a low-key entrepreneur well known in philanthropic circles for making large, anonymous donations. He had once led a charitable project where he gave away thousands of pairs of new shoes to children in underprivileged communities around the world. That explains the well-worn sneakers, Ariel thought, a pang of regret slicing through her. They likely meant more to him than any pricey pair of designer shoes could. Meanwhile, Delta's PR team tried reaching out to Marcus for an official statement, but he remained elusive. Rumor had it he didn't even have an active social media presence. Everyone wanted to interview him on national morning shows, but he declined. Ariel watched in silent awe as his mystique grew. He was far from the poor traveler she'd assumed. A week later, Ariel received a call from Dan Baker. The internal investigation was complete, and they needed her to come in for a meeting. Heart-pounding, she arrived at the Delta corporate offices in Atlanta. She expected the worst, maybe outright termination. Instead, Dan greeted her with a measured smile. Paula was also there, along with a third official, Linda Hastings, who oversaw charitable partnerships. "We have some updates," Dan began. "First, your job. We're not letting you go. Instead, we're mandating you attend a comprehensive training program on passenger relations and empathy. You'll be under probation for 6 months." Relief coursed through Ariel, though shame tugged at her. "I understand," she said quietly. "I'm truly sorry for what happened." Paula slid a document across the table. "We've also been in touch with Mr. Lowry. He's quite gracious. He's not pressing any formal complaint against you or the airline. In fact, he offered to pay for the training costs for flight attendants who might need extra coaching on empathy and cultural awareness." Ariel's eyes widened. "He's paying for that too?" Linda nodded. "Yes, but only on the condition that we implement a new Compassion in Flight initiative, which includes staff seminars and philanthropic efforts. Part of that includes distributing brand new shoes to underprivileged children at certain destinations. He suggested we call it the Walk in Their Shoes campaign." Emotions tightened Ariel's throat. She recalled how Marcus had gently placed his jacket around the cold elderly woman and how he'd calmly endured Ariel's scorn. The realization that he was continuing to do good even after her harsh words deepened her regret. Dan offered a kind smile. "We'd like you to be the face of the new initiative, Ariel. We believe redemption is possible, and that your story could help remind other flight attendants how critical empathy is at 30,000 feet. Ariel swallowed a surge of tears. She nodded, unsure if she deserved such an opportunity, but determined to make amends. "I'll do whatever it takes," she whispered. "Thank you. And if it's possible, I'd like to apologize to Mr. Lowry in person." Paula and Linda exchanged glances. "He said he's traveling again soon," Linda replied. "Perhaps you'll get your chance." Over the following months, Ariel participated in the new program, telling her cautionary tale during training sessions. She recounted how she judged a passenger by his battered sneakers, only to learn he was an entrepreneur with a heart of gold. She contributed to collecting shoes for underprivileged kids, traveling occasionally to distribution events on behalf of the airline. To her surprise, Ariel found the experience profoundly humbling. In each pair of battered shoes she encountered, she saw the possibility of a remarkable story beneath the surface. She realized that while polished appearances might impress the eye, genuine compassion and generosity leave an indelible mark on the soul. One afternoon, months later, Ariel was returning from a volunteer event when she spotted a familiar face at the airport lounge. Marcus Lowry, wearing the same beaten-up sneakers. Summoning her courage, Ariel approached. He regarded her calmly, a hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth. "I owe you an apology," she said softly, "and a thank you. You changed more than just that one flight. You changed my life." Marcus shook her hand. "I'm glad," he said warmly. Then he gestured to his shoes. "They're still carrying me far." Ariel smiled through misty eyes, no longer seeing those sneakers as a sign of poverty or poor taste. Instead, she saw them for what they truly were, a testament to a journey fueled by kindness and conviction. Thank you for joining us on this journey, where a pair of worn sneakers taught us all that appearances can be deceiving and that acts of kindness can create ripples far beyond a single flight. Our flight attendant learned the hard way that compassion and humility can mend even the most embarrassing mistakes. If this story resonated with you, please show your support by hitting the like button, sharing it with friends who might need a reminder that true wealth lies within, and subscribing to this channel for more heartfelt tales of everyday heroism. Your engagement not only encourages us, but helps spread messages of empathy, growth, and second chances to a wider audience.